Denver just lost. And somehow, that is not even close to the biggest story coming out of this week. Stick with me here, because what is happening behind the scenes with this offense is the kind of development that gets buried underneath a lopsided final score, and if you only look at that scoreboard, you are missing the entire point. There is a legitimate transformation happening with this offense right now, one that has nothing to do with wins and losses in August and everything to do with what this team is going to look like once the games actually count. So forget the final score for a minute. Let's talk about what is really going on. Before we dive into the numbers, and trust me, there are a lot of them, and every single one of them is going to make you feel better about this football team, I need 30 seconds of your time. If you love getting the real breakdown on this offense, the stuff that does not show up in the box score, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It costs you absolutely nothing, and it helps this channel keep bringing you the kind of deep dive content you are not getting anywhere else. All right, now let's get into the good stuff. The name you need to be paying attention to is Davis Webb. He has been calling plays through the first 2 weeks of the preseason, and what he is doing with this offense is nothing short of a philosophy shift. Let's start with the clearest, most obvious signal of all: screen passes. Through the first 2 preseason games this year, Webb has called exactly 2 screen passes. 2, for comparison, over 3 preseason games a year ago, this offense called 13 screen passes, more than 4 times as many through a similar sample. Unless something drastically changes over the final tune-up game, this offense is on pace to call a fraction of the checkdown, dump it off football that fans spent all of last season complaining about. That alone should tell you something is different. But it is not just about what this offense is avoiding. It is about what it is chasing. Passing depth is the real story here, because that is the actual measure of whether an offense is trying to attack down the field or settle for what is comfortable. Through the first 2 weeks, 33.3% of this offense's passing attempts have traveled between 10 and 19 yards downfield, which is considered medium range. Compare that to only 26.6% of throws being classified as short range, the 0 to 9 yard variety that dominated so much of last season's offensive identity. That gap matters. It tells you this coaching staff is actively pushing the ball further down the field, and that shift has been heavily criticized as missing from this offense for the better part of a full season. Circumstances forced some of that conservative approach a year ago. Injuries at key skill positions left this staff with little choice but to play it safe. Now that the roster is healthy and whole again, the shackles are coming off, and the results are already showing up in the numbers. And this is where things get really exciting, because none of this matters if it does not translate with the starting quarterback under center. So let's look at what happened when Webb and Nix took the field for his limited preseason snaps against Green Bay. Across the entirety of last season, Webb and Nix ranked 30th in the league in air yards per attempt, sitting at 7.3 yards. In one limited outing this preseason, working behind a shuffled offensive line and going up against players he may not have seen much tape on, that number jumped to 11.6 air yards per attempt. Now, is that number sustainable across an entire 16 or 17 game slate? Realistically, probably not. This is a small sample against preseason competition, and it would be foolish to assume that pace holds. But here is the more important question. Does this offense ever fall back down to 7.3 yards per attempt again? The answer is almost certainly no. Even landing somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 yards per attempt over a full season, which feels like a very reasonable regression point, represents a jump of roughly 3.5 air yards per throw. Multiply that across 400, 500, 600 passing attempts over a full season, and you are talking about an enormous number of yards that were simply being left on the table under the old approach. This is not a minor tweak. This is a fundamentally different offensive shell. There is one more piece of evidence worth digging into, and it comes from the opening drive of each preseason game, the scripted drive that every offensive coordinator spends the entire week building in practice. This is the purest window into what a play caller actually wants his offense to look like when nothing has gone wrong yet and the game plan is still fresh. In the first preseason outing, The opening scripted drive covered 6 plays and produced 69 yards, a touchdown. In the second preseason outing against Green Bay, the opening scripted drive again covered 6 plays and produced 65 yards, another touchdown. 2 straight opening drives, 2 touchdowns, near identical efficiency. That is not luck. That is a coaching staff that has installed a scheme with real teeth to it, one capable of moving the ball with purpose right out of the gate. So here is the message for anyone who watched the final score against Green Bay and walked away discouraged. Do not let the ugly stretch of that game fool you into thinking the offense is broken. The majority of what went sideways in the back half of that contest came from players who are not going to be on this roster once cut-down day arrives. Guys fighting for practice squad spots or looking for a chance somewhere else entirely. Those snaps tell you almost nothing about how this starting offense is going to perform once the lights come on for real. If you are looking at the right sample, the first team snaps, the scripted drives, the passing depth trends, the story is overwhelmingly positive. This coaching staff has built something with real explosive upside, and the tape backs it up completely. Now here's a question worth sitting with for a second. Have you been impressed by what this starting offense has shown so far? Drop your answer down in the comments because I want to hear it, and my answer without a doubt is a resounding yes. Does that mean everything has been perfect? Of course not, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. There is one trend from these first 2 preseason weeks that genuinely deserves some real concern, and it has nothing to do with the offense at all. Special teams. This is the phase of the game that so often gets overlooked because it is not flashy like a touchdown pass, and it is not gritty like a defensive stop. But it might be the most quietly important part of football there is. And right now, it looks shaky. Go back and watch the long kick return Green Bay broke off during that recent matchup. The returner went completely untouched for the first 40 yards of that play. Not a single defender laid a finger on him. That is not a case of a player making incredible individual moves to slip through tackles. That is a case of lane discipline completely collapsing. The numbers back up what the eye test is showing. This defense is allowing an average of 34.25 yards per kick return through the preseason so far. To put that in perspective, if a kickoff sails into the end zone for a touchback, the receiving offense typically starts around their own 35-yard line. In other words, allowing 34 yards per return is functionally no better than just letting every single kickoff go for a touchback. Except now you are also risking a much longer breakaway return on top of it. Compare that number to where this same group stood during the strongest stretch of football a year ago, when they were allowing just 23.5 yards per kick return down the stretch of the season. That gap is more than 10 yards per return, and 10 yards of field position, snap after snap, week after week, adds up to real consequences over the course of a season. And this is not just outside analysis either. The head coach himself pointed to this exact issue after the loss, specifically calling out kickoff and kickoff return as an area where this team is currently losing the battle, alongside penalties and rushing efficiency. When your own coaching staff is naming special teams as a problem area publicly, you know it is being taken seriously behind closed doors, and that is a good sign that corrections are already in motion. Here is the part that actually makes this a little easier to stomach, though. Look at the group of players currently taking the bulk of these special teams reps. It is a collection of names where not a single one is a guaranteed lock to make the final 53-man roster. A couple of them have a reasonably strong shot, but plenty of others are genuinely fighting for their roster lives on the back end of this depth chart. That matters because it means this shaky special teams unit right now is not necessarily a reflection of the actual group that takes the field in the regular season. Once final roster decisions get made, that special teams unit could look considerably different and considerably more disciplined. It is also worth remembering just how much value special teams actually carries, even though it rarely gets talked about with the same energy as offense or defense. Field position wins and loses football games in ways that do not always show up cleanly in a highlight reel. How many times have you watched a team lose a game in the final 30 seconds because a special teams breakdown handed the opposing offense a short field to work with for a game-winning score? It happens constantly around the league. Beyond field position, special teams can swing momentum entirely, especially at home, giving a crowd something to feed off of at exactly the right moment. And for a roster that is bringing back the vast majority of its core pieces from a season ago, special teams also represents one of the only avenues certain depth players have to actually see the field and prove they belong. This is not some throwaway concern, either. Special teams efficiency was a real issue for this team a season ago as well, finishing in the bottom half of the league in advanced special teams efficiency metrics. And look at who sat at the very top of that same category last season, the eventual Super Bowl champion. That is not a coincidence worth dismissing. Now, to be fair, if special teams and penalties are the two biggest concerns heading into a new season, that is a genuinely good problem to have in the grand scheme of things, because both of those issues come down to discipline and execution rather than a talent deficiency. Offensive linemen tightening up their hands to avoid holding calls, defenders staying more disciplined instead of grabbing and getting flagged, special teams units simply holding their assigned lanes. These are fixable problems. These are coaching and focus problems, not roster construction problems, and that distinction matters enormously with the regular season bearing down. So where does that leave things heading into the final tune-up before the games start counting for real? The offense has shown legitimate data-backed signs of a real transformation under new play calling influence, explosive passing depth trending upward, screen pass reliance trending sharply downward, and opening drive execution that has been nearly flawless through 2 straight weeks. That is the story that should have every single person excited heading into the regular season. At the same time, there is a real and measurable special teams issue that needs to get cleaned up before Monday Night Football rolls around, and it is on the coaching staff to make sure those corrections show up in practice over these final crucial days. Taken together, this is a team with a genuinely exciting offensive identity forming right before our eyes, paired with a very fixable, very correctable issue on special teams that has already been acknowledged out loud by the people in charge. That is a combination worth feeling good about heading into the year, even with an ugly final score sitting on the board from this past week. So let me know down in the comments, has this offense won you over yet? Or are you still waiting to see it translate once the games start to matter? I want to hear where you stand, and I read every single comment that comes through. And if you made it all the way to the end of this breakdown, that tells me you are exactly the kind of fan this channel is built for. Do me a favor before you go. Like this video so more people get the chance to see this breakdown, drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you have not already hit that subscribe button, please do. It costs nothing and it helps this channel keep growing so we can keep bringing you this level of detail all season long. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, stay locked in, keep it right here for Everything Denver, and I will catch you in the next one.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.